Hello, welcome to World Extermination Radio, WXR. I know last time I said that I was going to be talking to Natural 20. Well, some things came up, and now we're not talking. I'm probably going to talk to him sometime next week. But that's okay, because I'm here with somebody who's even better. Just kidding, Natural 20. You're cool, too. I'm here with a Russian Doomer, someone who's a member of the Doomworld forums, and has a master's in the University of Demonology. I'm here with Demonologist. How you doing, Demonologist?
Hi there, I'm fine, and you?
I'm good. All right.
That's great.
It's good, man. I'm glad I'm talking to you. You're a pretty cool forum member. One of the reasons I did want to talk to you is I noticed you play a lot of Doom WODs, and you've played a lot of stuff. And I like to look at some of your posts on Doomworld because you review people's projects, and you're very honest with your approach when you tell people what you think about it. Like you don't sugarcoat things. You tell people exactly how you feel, and sometimes, depending on who it is, it can hurt their feelings if you're harsh with them. But I think that's something that's kind of important to me. It's important that you're honest because if people want to develop their skills as a level designer, they're going to need to hear honest feedback. Wouldn't you say so?
That's the most polite way to call me an asshole I could think of. Well, thank you for all the flattering words. I don't think I really deserve them, after all the celebrities on your show, like Tom Hall and American McGee, and then it's just me.
Oh, no. Well, you're an important guy, too.
Sorry for interrupting.
No,
I guess
it's
my
okay.
crowning achievement is just waking you up so early just to have a talk with me.
Oh, no, it's okay. Yeah, I wake up pretty early anyway, so it's really no problem. But no, I'm really happy to talk to all kinds of members around the Doom community. I think there's a lot of really interesting people on Doomworld and around the Doom community and stuff. And I think there's a lot of really diverse people. And it's not always obvious on the Doom forums because I think a lot of people tend to agree on a lot of things. But there's other things that I think are pretty important that are worth discussing. Like I noticed a lot of your maps that I've played. For example, Realm of Demonology is one I've played, and you have a new project that came out not too long ago, Noctambulist.
Yeah.
And you have kind of you have a very intense kind of gameplay style. It's very fast paced, and it uses monsters really well because it keeps a lot of pressure on the player.
Oh boy, thank you.
Yeah, that's a very cool way of going about it because I guess we've played so many Doom WODs before. I guess a lot of people go with the same like run of the mill kind of style where they just kind of put monsters in hallways and really basic traps, and it's mostly like shotgun gameplay and stuff. But I think it's really fun when people use the tools that are available in Doom, whether it be the monsters, or the weapons, or the power ups, and use them to the best of their ability to make the most exciting experience.
Well, I guess you're right, but then again, I've got weird sense of humor, so sometimes I use stuff like blur spheres for funsies, just to see how long the players can survive some set battles.
Yeah, that's weird with the blur sphere because it's like it's supposed to be a power up, but in many cases it makes things harder.
Oh yes. One of the most useless things ever made.
Yeah, it's weird. Like it's only good for like fighting hit scan enemies that use like chain gunners and shotgun guys and stuff because they'll miss. But when you're like dodging fireballs and you're kind of depending on monsters to throw fireballs in a straight line, it can really mess you up because you're like, especially when with Hell Knights and stuff, like they'll look like they're throwing a fireball one way and then they'll quick shift over and throw the fireball the other way. And that's when you get hit.
Yeah, indeed. That's how it works. Well, anyway, you see, as a player, you have some specific preferences, like you like this, you don't like that. Then you have some things you consider questionable, for example, that balance on this thin rope and threaten the whole thing. They can drag the whole thing down.
Yeah.
And as a mapper, you get a different perspective, so you can look at things at a different angle.
Yeah, right.
Then you can experiment with these things you dislike, you find questionable or something. So every map, since the very beginning, except maybe that realm of demonology you mentioned, because that was noobish, that was me trying stuff and all that. Well, anyway, any other map after that is an experiment of sorts. Maybe it's a small thing, but it's an experiment for me, not some global things.
Yeah, well, Doom is a very good platform for things like that. Just kind of, like, I've been experimenting a lot more lately, too, which is not something that I used to do. When I first got into the Doom community, I was really focused on, like, making really good-looking maps. So I was really paying a lot of attention to detail and, like, texturing and getting, like, the colors to look right and the lighting to look right and things like that. And then gameplay kind of came second. And so a lot of the maps that I started off making were pretty easy for most players. And that's because I didn't really take it very seriously. But it seems nowadays people are more gravitating towards more gameplay-centric maps. So they plan, like, they create these gameplay experiments where, like, maybe they'll have, like, sniping arachnotrons over in the distance, or, like, cyber demons are used a lot more liberally now than I remember them being used back when I first started playing Doom. So there's a lot of really cool stuff. You told me earlier that you're a pretty skilled player. Have you played a lot of? I guess you played a lot of Doom WODs and stuff. What kind of WODs have you been playing lately?
First of all, the thing that I'm a skilled player, it's probably from someone else's perspective. I still think I suck. Well, anyway, lately, let me think. I guess the latest one was Blade of Agony episode 2. So basically not Doom at all.
Yeah. I talked to Tormentor not too long ago, and he said that was one of the things that was kind of concerning to him, because he wanted to spread the Blade of Agony out to, like, other communities and stuff, because it's not like Doom. But like, if I'm going by some of the maps that you've played that you've made, what kind of maps have you played that, like, inspired you to make the kind of maps that you do like?
That's a hard question, really, but there are many things. You see, I play mostly slaughter maps, okay, some fast-paced stuff, like skill souls maps and the like. And sometimes there are some specific traits, mostly in gameplay, that I want to pursue. Also, I guess I'm somewhat famous for ripping off Quake. Yeah, right. In visual department, at least. So, no really some particular inspirations. It depends on the situation. Like, I'm sitting in front of the editor and thinking to myself, today I want to make something like this. Then I have some imaginary plan, or maybe something already planned, like from years ago sometimes. And so how it's done. This is how it's done.
So, like, you mentioned Skill Sol's maps. He makes some pretty cool maps. They're very he's very for somebody who can make a really good looking map. He also makes his maps very gameplay centric too. They're very fast paced. They're fun to move around in.
That's the cool part, actually. He certainly knows what he's doing when it comes to gameplay. Not too overwhelming, but not a walk in the park either.
Yeah, exactly. Is that so is that kind of like where you get some of your inspiration from? Like, you like to make things that are especially challenging, but not necessarily easy?
Well, challenge is a question of perspective. Like,
right.
Sometimes it's batshit insane, like they call it that way. But sometimes it's like something probably easy for a veteran that's still going to be hard for an ordinary player, something like that. I'm interested in all kinds of challenges on this scale, so why not? The Noctambulist you mentioned, it actually tries to encompass different styles, not necessarily slaughter. In fact, I tried to kind of move away from it there.
You tried to move away from slaughter? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's true. Like, I don't know, maybe 40% at best is slaughter in that map set.
Slaughter's such an open definition, it seems like, in the community. There's a lot of people who, like, I saw a thread recently, somebody was talking about things that mappers do that annoy them the most. And on that list is somebody makes a slaughter map, and they hate that. But that's such a it's such a weird word to use, because what people think is a slaughter map is different than what more skilled players would think. Like I think some people just see a map that has a lot of monsters in it and like a BFG, and they're like, oh, this is a slaughter map. But that's not always the case, right? I mean, you can use a BFG and a lot of monsters and not make a slaughter map.
No, that's not the case at all, indeed. Slaughter map has a specific mechanic where you have to control hordes more specifically.
Yeah.
So you see, the Doom is about, let's roughly divide it, okay? It's like about individuals in small groups, not necessarily threatening ones, but they can also be threatening, of course.
Yeah.
And then it's about hordes, where you have to play some chess, perform some fancy dances just to stay alive, to avoid fire, to make the horde move in the direction you desire, something like that. So the latter is slaughter.
Yeah. Yeah, like some of the ways that I think of it is I kind of imagine it, well, I guess it's not always true, but the way I think of it is I think of something like Dead Simple, Map 7 Dead Simple, where it's like you're being attacked from all different angles and you have to like kind of, but which is like the arena aspect of a Doom map kind of makes it a slaughter map, but there's also other factors that come into play, like what you described, where it's like you're controlling monsters and trying to like herd them into a place that you want them so that they're kind of easier to kill, or you're trying to get them to infight with other monsters, which you can't do in Dead Simple. But yeah, there's a lot of different elements that I guess people don't always understand, and it has very little to do with the number of monsters and more to do with the gameplay elements that you use inside of the slaughter map, rather than like just killing them on your own.
Well, for what it's worth, they still have a point. Like, not every slaughter map is successful in what it's trying to achieve, and then there are earlier examples that were still, rough around the edges and all that. Like modern slaughter maps, they are easily distinguishable, they are polished, most of the time, okay.
Yeah.
They are made by competent mappers who know things about gameplay, about how things work, and so, in their hands, this is a very effective tool. But then again, it wasn't always like this. So, yeah, there are bad examples, of course.
Yeah. You said you're like a pretty skilled mapper. Or, I'm sorry, you said you're not a very skilled player. Which I don't think is entirely true. I've seen some of your demos before, and I think you're very good. But
thanks.
But let's talk. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people who play Doom, and the range of skill varies a lot. Of course, there's some people who are like amazing, and then there's some people who are not that great, but they think they're good. And so like, are there some mappers that? Or I'm sorry, I keep saying mappers. Are there some players that you've seen that you think are much better than you?
Of course, lots of those, mostly speedrunners.
Yeah, I've watched some of Bloodite Crypto's playthroughs in the Doomworld Iron Man League, and I don't know how he does it, but he plays through like entire megawatts from start to finish without dying, and that blows my mind.
Oh yeah, no, honestly though, I don't have neither patience nor time for that.
That's
usually
true.
A small bit at a time.
That's true. It's having patience. That's I think that's like one of the major components of being a skilled player, is having the patience to do it. Because some maps do just take way too long to play. I've seen plenty of maps that, like, if there's some maps that, even if you watch like the UV Max demos of them, they take like an hour and a half to beat. Like Time of Death, for example, his maps are like ridiculously long.
Well, anyway, you see, there's a hard way to go before you can manage your emotions, especially if you're playing saveless like I do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some call me clinically insane. I remember, of course. Well, anyway, it took some time, definitely, probably years actually, before I kind of reached the current state and stopped shouting in anger at everyone around me.
I do that too. When I play without saves, and I I record demos. I record demos with everything that I play. So I don't play with saves, and I don't play with any kind of cheat codes or anything. I play the map from start to finish, and if I die, I just start the map all over from the beginning. And it's a weird thing to say because I complain that I don't have enough time to play Doom and I create these rules for myself where I don't play with saves or with cheat codes or with any like special source ports or anything. But I feel like that's a very very powerful way to like kind of train your skills, is to like kind of play under these conditions that you create for yourself.
Yeah, that makes two of us, but then again, I don't see any fun anymore in playing with saves. It just feels too mechanical.
Yeah.
It's like you're doing some regular job at a factory or something, not fun at all. So yeah. I'd rather lose some of my nerve cells, but play the way I like it.
Yeah, I feel that way too. Because like if you are, it almost does after you've been playing without saves for so long, it does almost feel like cheating. And if you're gonna play it that way, it's not that fun. It's just like it puts a lot more pressure to know that you only get one shot at beating this level. Otherwise, you have to start all over again, and that kind of makes you more alert, and that makes the gameplay a little more exciting too.
Then again, that sensation when you actually beat it.
Yeah, it's extremely rewarding.
Yeah, that's how it works, indeed.
So let's talk a little bit about Noctambulist. What were some of your ideas when you were designing that map?
Well, aside from what's written in the text file, the ideas are actually pretty old. I can't say exactly for how long I've been carrying them in my head around, but anyway. So the first map is kind of a minor quintessence of things I dislike in Doom. So I guess it's pretty annoying. It's got a turret cyber, a damaging floor fight, a platforming section, and all that. All kinds of shit I dislike, and Tyson punching, of course.
You designed a map based on things you don't like?
Oh yes, that's the most interesting aspect about experimenting in the editor, like it's always actually that way. Pretty much nearly every map of mine has something I don't really like as a player, but as a mapper, I let it slide. So the first map is like this, the second is actually much more lenient, probably more like a contemporary modern map, still somewhat hard, but not so overwhelming, not at all. And the third one is something in between, I guess. It's got much incidental stuff, and then some slaughter stuff as well.
So what is it about mapping that makes you okay with creating things that you don't like as a player? That's so interesting to me.
As I said, it's just a different perspective. When you're the puppet master, you can toy with something you don't really think of seriously when you're just playing something. So That's you true. See it from the other side. It's somewhat enlightening, I think. So in cases like that, you can do things you usually disregard as a player or something.
Yeah, so when you design your maps, you're not necessarily designing them for yourself. Is that what you're saying?
I design them for myself, but that's probably going to be a weird expression. But, as a scientist, as some mad scientist conducting some weird experiments in his lab.
Yeah.
So this is my modus operandi.
Okay, so you're trying to like create something that you wouldn't normally like, and you're trying to, I guess, by the map being yours, it might kind of open your eyes towards that particular type of situation. Like you said, you don't really like cyber demon turrets. I personally don't like them that much either. But not to say that they're all bad, but in most cases, I've been pretty unlucky with cyber demon turrets where I'll just get hit by a random rocket and it'll kill me. But
I know the feel. Yeah, you see, it's true, but it's also equally true that I'm trying to incorporate it into something that I would actually like. So, said first map of Noctambulist is actually an attempt to make something playable out of those annoying traits.
Huh.
Whether I succeeded or not is up to the players to decide, of course.
Well, that's a very humble way of looking at it. It's important to what the players feel about the map rather than how you feel about it. But that's an interesting perspective, because I often see in like mapping threads where people kind of like make these rules of things that like don't do this and don't do that, and I don't think that's really the right way to go, because I think almost anything in Doom can be fun if you know how to tweak it enough. And so like something like that is like cyber demon turrets and like what any other kind of tropes that you don't enjoy in a particular map. I think there's ways that you can make it fun just with practice and like just kind of tweaking it and trying to do whatever you can. So for that reason, I don't think there's really anything that you really shouldn't do in a map, as long as you know how to do it right and you can do it in a way that's fun.
Well, there are always, two ways for you to go. So you either have fun in the process yourself, so you make maps for yourself, or you're trying to please the players.
Yeah.
So whenever it's the latter, you're in a world of pain, I guess. For me, it's actually the former. Whenever I stare into the editor, I'll try to experiment with various things, depending on my current mindset. So I am my worst critic still.
Yeah. So that's the case for a lot of mappers.
Yeah, and the judge, the jury, and the executioner for myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
So whenever I put my works out there for the others, well, if some of them enjoy it, it's cool, of course, it's encouraging and all that, but then again, if they don't, I'll leave.
Yeah. That's the fun thing about mapping, is that it's very rewarding when you create something and people like it, because you know that you created the time that you spent designing the map paid off because you were contributing to someone's enjoyment with the game. That's what I find so rewarding about making maps. It's not necessarily creating the maps that I would want to play, which is true most of the time. I do try to create maps that I would like to play, but it's also very rewarding to see that other people are having fun with something that I created too.
Yeah, I agree. But then again, if a mapping is a chore for you and you're not having fun in the process, then why tormenting yourself? Just quit it.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how many people like design maps knowing that people aren't going to like it and they just do it anyway and they're not enjoying the process. I haven't I haven't personally ran into anybody that's like that, but, but if that is the case, you probably should stop.
Meet me then.
Really? You don't enjoy the map designing process?
Not really. You see, there are different phases of mapping. Like, I don't really like drawing and detailing rooms. It's quite tormenting for me. But on the other hand, the gameplay is a fun part, of course.
Yeah, my perspective's changed recently too, because when I first got into Doom mapping, I was very focused on detail and making the maps look good and stuff. But that kind of perspective has been kind of like secondary to me lately, because I've been focusing more on making really nice traps. Because what I find pretty interesting about Doom is that we've killed the same we've killed the same types of monsters hundreds of thousands of times. Everybody's killed 1,000 cyber demons. Everybody's killed 10,000 mancubi and 10,000 revenants and all that. And it's not necessarily like in order to make a level hard, it has very little to do with the types of monsters that you're fighting, because we've killed them so many times. It depends on how they're used. So like if you have monsters like that are on turrets, that might be like a very strange. When I say turrets, by the way, for people who are listening, that's when you have monsters that are kind of like they're stationed like on a pillar where they have like a good sniping position at you, but they can't like walk towards you. They can just kind of shoot you from a distance. But since like most people are probably used to fighting monsters in close combat and stuff, having to fight monsters that are in like sniping positions, that can be kind of tricky, and that's what makes the gameplay pretty fun. because we're dealing with monsters in ways we haven't experienced them before. And so if you're designing a map and you're trying to, I guess, trying to make the gameplay challenging, it's not always, you can't just like put a bunch of revenants in the map and be like, okay, this map's hard now. It involves using trap setups, or using the monsters as turrets, or getting some sort of infighting relationship involved, or all kinds of different factors come into play as far as designing a map that is difficult. And so like creating the right layouts and stuff like that. So when I'm designing a map that's focused primarily on visuals, the gameplay almost comes second. So I kind of start, you can't, like, the way you design the map is very important to create difficult gameplay. And if you start with details first, that makes the map harder to kind of like orchestrate the gameplay.
Well, for now I haven't been able to like make a location without at least a remote plan for what's going to happen there.
Yeah, right. You have to like kind of, like, you have to have an idea in your head, like, what are these monsters going to infight here, or I want the player to get this item, and then once he gets this item, that's when these arc vials are going to show up, or something like that. And that's what makes, I feel like that's very important for the gameplay, is like the line def actions that you use in order to create these special events, and not necessarily just the monsters themselves. Because I've to give an example, I've played you've probably heard of Oblige, right? The level generator.
Oh yes, I did.
Yeah, I used that recently, and the layouts that Oblige creates are pretty basic. You basically just walk into a room and there's monsters scattered around everywhere, and you can set it to the highest settings, and then it'll put cyber demons and arc vials and all kinds of stuff, and then it'll overcompensate by giving the player like tons of health and ammunition and stuff too. So you'll find yourself in these situations where, like, sometimes you'll walk into a room and there'll be like 15 arc vials in it, which sounds terrifying for most for most players, but it's actually pretty reasonable because they give you enough resources, and the layouts are pretty basic. So you can doorway camp and all kinds of things like that, which you wouldn't normally be able to do in a map that's been specifically designed to make it so that, like, taking cover is not very easy to do.
So you've been playing a computer-generated Slaughterfest 2011, I see.
yeah, basically.
Well, anyway, you see, it's always noticeable when the gameplay is an afterthought to a design, compared to design, I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Like, most of the time when a mapper thinks of, like, drawing something first, like, you know, the whole map, like, the visuals and the stuff, and then placing monsters in there pretty much randomly, you can certainly feel it. It's almost always like a filler or something, just wastes the player's time.
Yeah.
And on the contrary, when you actually design your layouts around encounters, it feels much less artificial, at least when you're doing it right.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you have like an eye for things like that. Do you when you play people's maps, that's something you're pretty much, that's probably something you're looking for, right? Whether someone's designing their map gameplay first or layout first. Well, maybe not layout first, but
well, mostly yes, gameplay first, but then again, it depends. Like, it's not some generalization. It's, it depends on the particular case.
Yeah. So, like, what are some examples? You said you were playing Blade of Agony recently, which is obviously not a very Doom-like project.
Oh, yes.
So, like, what are some things you're looking for when you're, like, playing a map like that? Like, well, I guess you're just trying to have fun, right?
Of course.
Well, I guess the question I'm asking is, like, what if, like, how can you be, like, what are some tips for somebody who wants to, like, be a better play tester? Like, what are some things that you look for when you're playing a Doom project?
A better play tester? Well, I can tell that there are different types of play testers. So I'm mostly a gameplay-oriented play tester, and
yeah,
I mostly check the battles, you know the balance and all that. And then there are some folks who are especially talented in breaking the fuck out of your map. Like they're tracing bugs and all that. I'm not saying I don't encounter bugs, but I don't really hunt them specifically.
Yeah, neither do I.
So yeah, you can either try and test some particular fights, you know, cheese them and all that, or you can try to break them up to find the exploits and all that. So I doubt I can give any sound advice, actually.
Because it definitely depends on the kind of map that we're playing. So it's depending on like who made the map and what they're trying to create. That like one of my suggestions for people who do want to play test a map is to talk to the mapper and figure out what the person is trying to do with their map. So if they are trying to create a Slaughterfest or something, you can kind of take those elements into account as you're playing it and think about whether the map is a Slaughterfest or not based on how the map plays. But if they're designing the map for a different reason, you would...
Well, of course, it's fair enough. Like, you always have to communicate with the mapper you're testing the map for, otherwise it's useless.
Yeah, but have people asked you to do playtesting for their projects before?
Yes, they did. Most recently for the latest Stardate.
Oh, nice.
So this is it.
Okay,
but then again, we've got a somewhat maybe surprisingly lengthy story with Rubix with regards to playtesting. Like, he's been asking me occasionally to do that sort of thing for several years now.
Yeah.
So I've been doing it.
Yeah. So like when you're playtesting Rubix Stardate, you said earlier you kind of look for encounters that you can cheese. What does that mean to cheese an encounter?
It means that you beat it some unintended way, much easier way than the author envisioned, like you camp it, or you find an exploit you can use to your advantage. So, in short, it's when you break fights. I think I'm actually kind of good at that. I like cheesing things, like, very much. I use whatever I can for survival.
So, like, for example, what would be an example of cheesing a fight? Like, let's say that, so like maybe if there was like a trap that was supposed to happen, and you found a way around the trap to make the trap not happen. Would that be an example?
Well, as an example, yes, but then again, it's as banal as finding some camping spot just in the arena from where you can safely clear the opposition.
Oh, okay.
Most of the time, it's that simple.
Oh, okay. So like doorway camping, for example. I know that's something that people complain about sometimes. If you can doorway camp, I guess that would be an example of cheesing an encounter, because that way you can use the doorway to your advantage, because you can just keep dipping in and out of the doorway to avoid taking shots when you're expected to go into the arena and get hit from all sides.
When nowadays you see these things, they usually depend on the mapper, so if he's not willing to close the door behind you right away, then it's probably his fault, and yeah, most likely the fight will be cheesed.
So that's pretty cool. Have you been interested in doing more playtesting?
I always am. It depends on the project.
It depends on the project. So, like, what kind of maps would you like to play? I guess I would imagine that you're interested in Slaughterfest maps based on what I've seen in your post on Doomworld. Is that true?
Well, to an extent, yes, but not necessarily. So, like, my preferences are wider than that. Let's put it that way. Pretty much everything that's fast-paced is going to be my alley, most likely.
Oh, okay. Have you seen like any projects that have been like kind of been talked about lately that have been catching your interest?
Let me think. Well, ironically, it's not about that. It's, that total conversion what's it called? Wrecker, I believe.
Wrecker, yeah, that's right.
Oh, so yeah, I've been waiting for that eagerly, actually.
Yeah, it looks really cool.
Yeah, indeed, I actually like good TCs and some, advanced maps that make something different with the engine.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Wrecker is this TC that's being created by Reve, I guess that's how you pronounce his name. He's working on this TC that's kind of like, it's almost like this like comical blend of Heretic and Hexen. Like Hexen and Heretic are a bit darker. They're kind of like closer to Quake as far as like the gameplay elements, or not the gameplay elements, but like the theme, I guess, because it's like kind of darker and more grim. But Wrecker is a bit more colorful, but it has a lot of cool things. Like your character is like this warrior with a bow and arrow, and he can use an axe, and there's all kinds of like monsters and stuff, and it's got all new sprites and textures and all that stuff, and it's almost like a standalone game. And it's been in development for, I think I've been made aware of it about a year ago, and it looks really cool, and it looks like it's coming along too.
Yeah, here's hoping it's going to be fairly soon.
Yeah, I saw a post that you made recently for Shadow of the Wool Ball. What did you think about that?
Oh yeah, it was great. Very artistic, very cool, very fun, very funny too.
I haven't played it myself. What is it? What is it about?
Well, for what it's worth, there is a prequel to that. Wait for a second. I guess Shadow of the Wool Ball is the first part, and the Rise of the Wool Ball is the second part.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Right. So the Shadow of the Wool Ball is like Wolfenstein 3D sort of thing, like pretty much like a cute tribute with cats and all that. But it's got some interesting mechanics, like it's creative, like really. And the Rise of the Wool Ball, it's more like a Rise of the Triad. So jumping paths, traps, all kinds of things you'd expect from Rise of the Triad, all that. So a logical development.
So do you think there's like you said it's kind of like Wolfenstein 3D in a way? I guess that's because I've seen some screenshots of it, and I see it's got like cartoon cats, and the maps use like all orthogonal angles with the rooms and stuff. I've played Wolfenstein before, and I've seen some people criticize it for using pretty much entirely hit scan enemies, and when you're stuck with the limits of like that kind of like blocky orthogonal Wolfenstein 3D engine, it's pretty tricky to make like fun level design, which is like different than something like Doom, because you can create any shape you want. You can get all kinds of like height differences and stuff like that, and there's monsters that throw different types of projectiles. What are some things that make? Well, let's talk a little bit about Shadow of the Wool Ball. Like, what is it about Shadow of the Wool Ball that makes it kind of more interesting than something like Wolfenstein 3D?
Well, first of all, its enemies are not entirely hit scan based. There are different types of enemies. Well, as far as I'm aware, it was the author's intention to make it Wolfenstein 3D-like, so it was his personal tribute, like all that. But then again, there are different types of enemies with projectiles. Some of them rush at you to explode right next to you, so kamikaze-like. That's pretty funny. Then again, there are some, wind currents, like when you're thrown across the corridor through the traps and all that, and you have to avoid some specific hazards along the way.
That's pretty cool.
And there is also that self-destruction sequence at the end of each level where you have to evacuate the level before it's blown up.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Indeed. it's as cool in practice as it is in theory, so...
That's pretty interesting.
That guy has got talent, that's for sure. And the sprites are lovely, actually. Minimalistic, but lovely.
Yeah. When it comes to Doom, do you think there's like... What are some ways to like maximize gameplay in order to make it the best it possibly can? Because we've talked a lot... I mean, we've played Doom for so long. We know a whole lot about like the Doom gameplay and things like that. What are some what if you could give advice to like new mappers and stuff? What do you think people should think about more when they're designing their maps?
Well, then again, the first thing they should think about is making things fun for themselves. But, well, as far as my preferences go, I don't like standing in place, so just keep punching me in the ass so that I keep moving. Much like that. Really, though, it's harder than it sounds, like making the situations threatening and engaging and fun at the same time. It's harder than one might think.
Yeah, because you can't just like cram 1,000 monsters into a room and be like, oh, this is hard. Because like you can, as you said, like there's ways you can cheese encounters. So like if you can find a place where you can get cover and then kill one monster at a time until they're all dead, then you just have like this really long, boring, grindy gameplay. So like if you're so like let's talk about like maybe ways that we can make it so that players are kind of forced into situations that would require them to move. Some ways I could think of, like you could shut a door behind the player, and that way they can't go back to the place where they can take cover from. That's one way, but I'm sure there's other ways too.
There are many ways, starting with an ordinary one like station monsters everywhere and don't give the player supplies, so force him to run to grab something like further into the map, and then he can actually fight back, something like that.
Yeah, right.
So it's not necessarily an arena. It's just the monster composition and monster placement and weapon distribution and health and power ups and all that. So you don't always have to lock the player up.
Yeah, right. Like if for something so important like having a new weapon that you can use to kill monsters, it's cool to use that in a way where like you're kind of baiting the player to go where you want them to go. So you can put the weapon that they need very far into the map, and then they have no choice but to activate all these traps or wake all these monsters and things like that.
Yeah, exactly that. But once again, we already mentioned Skillsoul here. So he's very good at creating those situations that are, frightening, like you're being surrounded instantly from all directions. But then again, they are mostly weaklings, and you can dispatch them very quickly.
Right.
So that's very cool, actually, when you don't have to grind through, but you are threatened, and you can deal with the hazards quickly enough, as long as you do it with a cold mind and all that, and know what you're doing. So
yeah, that's really important, isn't it? Like grindy gameplay, like that's something that obviously most people don't enjoy. Maybe there are some people who like killing monsters for hours and hours and hours in the same place forever. I don't know who those people are, but I'm sure there's some of them.
They are probably not, and something's not right about them.
Right. But yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of people get the impression that a map that is a slaughter map, because it has so many monsters, is by definition grindy, and that's not always true.
Well, when it's a good slaughter map, it's not going to be true at all. It can be low in terms of the actual design, so it can have many rooms, a good scale, something that you can traverse for minutes, maybe tens of minutes, even without monsters. But then again, the encounters, they don't usually last that long. So, and when they do, they are usually lethal all the way through. So that's the right way to do them.
Yeah, you want to kind of create. I guess you want to create like this feeling of panic. So like, well, maybe not panic, but you want to keep the player under pressure the entire time. And when people say they don't like Slaughterfest maps, that kind of baffles me, and it's because I feel like it's because they haven't played a good one yet, and I don't know. I mean, like I've seen some people complain about it, and I don't. It's hard to get into their head because they usually don't continue the argument. They just say Slaughterfest are bad, so that's their entire argument, and I don't think it's fair. It doesn't really do justice to a lot of good maps that use a lot of monsters and use a lot of pressure and use very powerful weapons and power-ups and stuff that most people would consider to be a slaughterfest, and then they just kind of dismiss it because of, I guess they don't like to see that many monsters on the screen at once or something. I don't know.
Well, it's a lost cause. There are always people that dislike something, that complain about something. Nothing really changes. It's about every subject and every topic all the time. Maybe in time they will understand something, but then again, there are folks who already understand, so these are probably the ones you're going to pay your attention to.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely fair. I mean, if you don't like Slaughterfest maps, I guess you're not required to. But I don't know. Like I look at like some of like Nine Inch Heels posts, and she's very like trying to encourage people to play more Slaughterfest maps, and I don't think she's doing it the right way because she seems to give people a hard time. But but like I do feel like that people who just say that Slaughterfest maps are bad, they are kind of like limiting themselves, because there's a lot of great stuff that I found in my practice of designing maps and like focusing less on detail and more on gameplay, that I am able to make a pretty decent Slaughterfest map. And in doing that, the skills that I learned from designing it have helped me in creating good gameplay for maps that that people wouldn't consider to be a Slaughterfest map. Like there's a lot of interesting skill, like as far as like creating pressure and stuff in a Slaughterfest map, I find that to be pretty difficult. But with practice, you can scale it down and then design maps that are not Slaughterfest. Like they might only use a few monsters at a time, but I have like these skills that I can create pressure even in these in these types of maps that don't use lots and lots of monsters. Like I think, for example, Eric Alm is a good example of that, because he makes some pretty awesome slaughter maps and very late into Scythe 2. But then if you play some of his early maps, which are obviously not slaughter maps, but the gameplay is very strong, because there's a lot of parts where you're under a lot of pressure. There's some very sharp traps, and it's very fun.
You don't necessarily have to make slaughter maps to make things fun and hard and anything like it.
Yeah,
Not at all. But yeah, you still have to understand what you're doing.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that you have to be able to be a good slaughter mapper to make a decent fun map too, but I just think the skills that I get, like I like to think of mapping as kind of an exercise. I like to try different things to practice my skills. So designing a Slaughterfest map, even though it's a different style of gameplay, having the experience of being able to do it and like actually make a pretty decent one, the skills that I gain from working on something like that can be applied to other things too, if that makes any sense.
Of course they can, sure. Like when you're used to calculating everything, then you like start doing it all the time, everywhere, in every style.
Yeah, right.
So I guess it's natural.
Yeah, that's something that I think about a lot, because I like to I try a lot of different things when I'm mapping. I try to explore different themes and concepts and things like that. So like what I'll do is I'll design maps that are I don't always design maps with the intention of releasing it. I just try experiments and see how I can deal with them, and if I can create fun gameplay out of it, or an area that looks cool out of it, or just try different kinds of things. And I feel like that kind of shapes my skills as a mapper. And that's I don't know. I don't see a lot of people talking about it, so I don't know if a lot of people try that. I think a lot of people designed maps with the intention of releasing it, and then by doing that, they're maybe not experimenting. Well, I don't know. Maybe they're not like mapping with the intention of shaping their skills. They're just kind of mapping with the intention of sharing it with other people and hearing what they think, which is also very useful too. But I try a lot of different things when I'm mapping.
Yeah, I can tell. Like, you see, whenever I'm going to actually finish a map, I'm usually sharing it, yes. But then again, those things you mentioned about experiments and thinking about things, they usually happen in my head. Simple as that. So whenever I think that this idea is a stillborn one, then it's not probably even worth actually mapping it.
You don't think so? Oh, well, so like you keep ideas in your head. So you said Noctambulist was an idea that you had in your head for a long time?
Yes, that's true.
So like I'm trying to think. So like you didn't do like any like I do my map planning like on paper. I made a tutorial about it recently where like if I think of an idea for a map, I'll like write the idea down, or like for like specific events or encounters, and then I'll kind of like draw a layout on paper, and then I'll use that as a reference for for like the map that I'm going to make later on. Because if I sometimes if I'm designing a map on Doom Builder, and I start working on it, I get like maybe halfway through it, and then I'm not sure where I'm going with it. So if I have it planned out on paper first, I can use that as a reference to keep myself focused. But so you were telling me about how you design your maps with, I guess with some ideas that you've had in your head for a while, and I don't know. I'm not really sure where I'm going with this. I'm just trying to find out more about your mapping process.
The mapping process is hard. You see, like I said earlier, that I don't even consider myself a full-time mapper, so more like a player with some passion for occasional experimentation. That's more like it.
Okay.
Like most of the time, whenever I make something, it drains me out of enthusiasm, so I usually just quit the editor for a while, but the ideas in my head, they just keep adding up, and eventually some of them are going to see the light of day. So that's that. Anyway, yeah, I'm usually keeping things in my head, like, the basic floor plan, the encounters, all that. So when I start mapping it all comes down to details, like some intricate detailing on visual front, some maybe monster replacements, or something like, oh, I could put someone else there, like a fat mancubus, he's going to stand right here. So something like that. But most of the time, yeah, I have a clear enough vision of what I'm willing to make. Something like that.
So yeah, you kind of like lose enthusiasm while you're mapping. I guess that's fair. A lot of people, that happens to a lot of people. I think they either run into mapper's block, or maybe they just don't particularly enjoy the mapping process because they don't like what they're creating. Do you have ideas for maps that you would be willing to share, and then maybe other people could steal them and make maps for you, or do you want to keep them kind of private to yourself?
Those ideas are going to be hard to describe, actually, so I guess the best solution is to wait for me to make them one day.
Yeah, well, yeah, talking about especially particular gameplay scenarios isn't very easy all the time. I come up with like all kinds of like different ideas and stuff too. Like recently I made a list of some things that I would like to see in maps that I'm probably going to design later. But I like the idea of, like, for example, one thing that I think would be pretty cool is a situation kind of like Map 24, the Chasm, where you're walking across these narrow catwalks, and at the same time, there's like these turrets of arachnotrons trying to snipe at you, and that way you don't have you're kind of like under this constant pressure because you can't move around a lot without falling, and at the same time you're trying to dodge fireballs and stuff. So like it would be interesting to implement that into a map. There's other like scenarios that I thought of too. Like I'd like to see. I like situations where a cyber demon's crushing a whole bunch of monsters. So I'd like to get like a like kind of like this arena where cyber demons are like fighting against this stampede of mancubi, and see how many mancubus monsters I can use in order to kill the cyber demon, or at least weaken him enough that he'll die pretty quickly.
Well, I see where you're coming from, but I usually have like bigger plans than that. So most of the time, it's pretty much a complete map in my head. So I just need to make it come into reality, something like that. So it's not really just drafts. It's mostly about more or less complete things that can vary in some execution of some particular places and spots and whatever.
Yeah. Huh. So, are there some mappers that you really like that you'd like to see make more maps?
Of course. No, most notably, I guess it's going to be Danny Bubinga.
Ah, yes.
I want more right now.
Me too, man. I love Dan Babinga's maps.
There are many of them, like Dark River, Sad Rubik's actually, though his current direction is kind of scary. He's moving away very far from what he was doing earlier in the first Stardate and all that.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes, he does. Like, the most recent Stardate is already quite a deviation.
Is it really? I noticed when I played Stardate 20XD7, it was very hard. I mean, it was much harder than Stardate 20XD6, I think. For me, it was anyway. But I had trouble with Stardate 20XD6 too, just because I'm not the best player. But what do you think is different about Ribik's style now compared to what it was before? Well, what have you noticed that was different?
Well, for starters, he pretty much abandoned that slaughter maps only mentality, so he's been mixing styles and more focus on some, obscure progression lines and all that. So maps that become more complex, not entirely arena based and all that. So when you start thinking about it, it's actually quite different. Even though it's still like purple, it's still like hard and all that, but the execution is quite different. The philosophy is different.
Yeah, right.
Most of the time, yeah.
I like something that's really interesting to me about Ribik's style is he's very good at creating very, very difficult situations with very few monsters, and which is like I think it's a very powerful skill. Because I see that I used a lot in something like Plutonia Experiment, because like most of the maps don't have more than 100 monsters, but they're still pretty difficult maps compared to like most stuff that you'll play where people use like tons and tons of imps and you get a rocket launcher and you can just kind of plow through all of them, and then you have a map with like 200 monsters, 200 to 500 monsters, and it's not very hard. But to create a situation where you're dealing with like maybe only a couple of monsters, but there's other factors that come into play, like how they approach how they encounter the player, or like the amount of space that the player has to move. All these kind of factors make the situation really difficult, and that's something I find pretty fascinating about his particular style. And Dana Babinga is a little bit different. I mean, he does a lot of he can do those things too, I'm sure, but he uses pretty massive hordes and stuff in his maps. From what I've played, if Combat Shack 2 is any indication.
Oh, of course it is. Like, Danny Bubinga is, it's the man who made the right Thunder, I guess. So whenever Thunder gets anything wrong, here he comes and does it right.
Yeah.
Seriously though, he did a great job of elevating the slaughter to an entirely new level. I actually think that Combat Shock 2 is still one of the finest examples of this genre.
Yeah. Do you like Sunder?
I don't have a simple answer. It's a very
you have mixed feelings
work.
About it.
It's got some really cool maps, great scenarios, but then again, some not so good ones, and some rough around the edges. Types of battles that could have been done so much better than they were done actually. So
like what?
Some parts I do like, of course, but some don't really care for.
So like what are some things that like drive you crazy in Sunder? Is it like the grindy gameplay, or what is it exactly?
Sometimes it's grindy, yes, like you're battling a horde without much threat from it, so you're just like wasting your time on some routine activity you don't find much enjoyment in. And then there's the exact opposite, where you're in a very small room, cramped stuff, and you're in for one hell of a fight, like archviles and cyber demons and hordes everywhere and all that. both scenarios are not exactly pleasing, actually, I think so.
Oh, okay. So I get what you're saying. So like it's kind of janky in a way because like there's some situations that are easy but boring, and then there's others that are like really high pressure. And I guess like when these two events happen in the same map, it's like kind of it seems inconsistent, right?
Right, and so it's everything in between, actually. So some maps do a great job of actually achieving their goals, and some really don't. Like, that map, The Cage?
Yeah.
You probably remember it. To me, it's very clear that the gameplay on that one is an afterthought because it's just unfun in pretty much every encounter. Everything feels very forced and very, uninspired to me.
Yeah.
It's
interesting.
like teleporter traps all the time in inconvenient spots in locations that aren't really designed for this type of gameplay, so everything feels awkward, like something like that.
Yeah, a lot of people hold Sunder as like probably like the best Slaughterfest map or the Slaughterfest map set. And I don't know. I have kind of mixed feelings about it too. And it's strange. It seems inconsistent, and that's kind of I get that kind of impression from it too, because there are parts where you're just kind of like plowing through monsters that take forever to kill, and and then there's other part like you described where it seems like gameplay is almost an afterthought.
Well, for what it's worth, he was a very good artist, so
yeah.
On visual front, it was a revolution pretty much in slaughter maps. I can give him that, of course.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, like those massive towers that he creates, and the visuals they're very stunning, and I think that's very instrumental in making it a Slaughterfest map set that people can then that can get behind, just because it's so good looking. But yeah, but I know some people, like there are some people who think like Sunder is like probably like the best Slaughterfest map set out there, and that's not always true. I mean, there's been a lot of like great Slaughterfest map designers, like Death Destiny for example. He makes some like really awesome maps. They're probably not as good looking as Sunder, but they are pretty good looking, and they're very difficult. And Dan Babinga, for example, he like some of his like early stuff, like Combat Shock 1, is probably like not the best looking stuff, but he had some great ideas, and he's a very efficient level designer too. But it's interesting to make like I kind of see like almost like a divide in the community. Like there's people who like Slaughterfest maps and there's people who don't. And as far as like different like mapping camps and themes and stuff that people go for, like Slaughterfest and everything else are like basically the big two. I can't really think of many other. And
well, you can actually say the same about like people who like total conversions and people who despise them.
That's
like,
true. Yeah.
If the community would be uniform and all that, it would be quite boring. So the differences between us is what makes things interesting after all. So.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's what I find so interesting about talking to someone like you, because you're interested in Slaughterfest maps and you talk about, or you've designed kind of like maybe not Slaughterfest maps, but you design maps with like kind of that kind of gameplay style, and you talk to a lot of people with that kind of style, and you do play testing for people who make really hard maps, and that's tough for a lot of people to wrap their heads around if they don't have the skill set to beat them, and so I like that. I like that people are very diverse in the Doom community. That there's different kinds of mapping styles that people go for, and it's because like we've got like speedrunners and we have like programmers and all kinds of things. That makes Doom such an interesting community. There's so many different types of people. And I wonder this a lot, and I wonder if there's like other different types of like mapping themes or like different camps of Doom fans that are like underrepresented in Doom. There's like I don't know. I mean, there are plenty of people who play Slaughterfest maps, and I don't think it's just I keep using that word, the Slaughterfest, and it's such a general word to describe something. Could there be like a better word to describe that kind of gameplay?
It's okay, I can understand you, so no problem.
It's yeah, but I just want to make sure that people listening understand, because it's like slaughter. I don't know. It is. I've heard Revix complain about this plenty of times, that Slaughterfest is just a dumb word, because his maps get labeled as Slaughterfest all the time, even though he tries very hard to not use like massive hordes of monsters. But still, people are just like, oh, I don't play Revix maps because I don't like Slaughterfest, and that's stupid.
Well, he did slaughter maps in the past, and his maps are still hard most of the time, so those people have a point, even though it's not maybe totally fair.
Yeah, I guess there's a real challenge in like getting people to develop their skills and be able to play these like really hard maps, because the Doom has gotten harder. I've noticed that in like the last like 5 or 10 years, the general skill level of most Doom players has gotten much higher. So there's a lot of maps that come out these days are pretty closer to Slaughterfest than they are something that's more easier, because that kind of gameplay is boring to us now. We like being under pressure. We like causing massive hordes of monsters to infight with each other. We like controlling mobs of monsters and things like that. That's exciting for us. And to play maps that don't have those elements in them, it can be kind of boring, because we've played so many of them before.
Well, I think it's inevitable, because truth be told, if Doom never had all those maps and there was just Doom 1 and 2 and 2 final Dooms, then I would have quitted long ago.
Yeah.
Because I honestly can't stand most of those anymore. Only Plutonium, probably. So, and on the other hand, people play games for different reasons. So some of them play them occasionally. Now they're playing it, and after 1 month, they don't. So some play them just for fun, to relax and all that. So I can see where people who kind of dislike slaughter maps because they aren't really relaxing come from. So it's understandable to me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like we don't have to like make people do things they don't want to do. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like I don't know. I like a lot of different kinds of styles, and I like to explore. For example, I listen to a lot of different kinds of music. I listen to I mostly listened to like death metal and punk rock and stuff when I was younger, but now I'm like exploring different other genres of music too, because I made a friend recently who's really interested into like stoner rock and doom metal, and that was kind of corny to me at first when I first heard about it, but I kind of opened up to it because he was so interested in it, and that kind of made me interested in it, because we were able to talk about this new thing that was, well, it was new to me, and I was able to learn more about what was interesting about it from his perspective. So I like to talk to all kinds of different people around the Doom community who have different interests and stuff, and in hopes that we can kind of like spread the interest of these kinds of projects, or that these kinds of map sets and these different styles of maps, to other people that might not understand it as well. And and that slaughter maps is like it's kind of they're kind of held in a bad light for a lot of newer like casual Doom players, which is understandable. But there's also a lot of great stuff out there that they could be missing out on.
Well, who knows? Maybe in time they'll find their alley in this dark forest.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, you're doing a great work, actually, talking to all those folks.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I think it's cool. Like, it takes some courage to do so, but then again, I guess it's enlightening.
Yeah.
In a way.
So you've it takes a lot of skill to like get from playing like something like Doom 2 and then moving towards something like that Rivix would make, or like a Sunder or something like that. It takes a lot of skill development in order to get good enough to even play these new WADs that come out. how long have you been playing Doom exactly?
Oof, let me think. Probably 15 years or something.
Yeah, I think I've been playing for that long too, and I guess that's probably part of it because I think like the new Doom 4 game attracted a lot of new people. So if they're getting into Doom for the first time and then they're seeing all these maps made by people who've been playing Doom for 15 years, they're probably turned off by how hard it is. But um, so like if you could, do you think you could like? I've probably played something like many hundreds of WoDs, probably into the thousands of WoDs. I've played so many different Doom levels. Would you say you probably played that many too?
Oh yes, same for me.
So you played like all the classic Mega WoDs and stuff?
Oh, of course, classic and beyond that. I've played many obscure shit, like from early 90s and all that, for
Yeah.
Doom 1 and Doom 2, all kinds of maps, actually.
When did you first, like, what were some of the first WoDs that you played when you first got into Doom?
Oh, let me think. That's probably going to be Icarus.
Icarus, ooh.
Yeah, right, Icarus. Icarus, and you know that's used to be a commercial game, but as far as I'm aware, it's free now. It's called Hacks.
Oh, yeah, Hacks.
So these are probably the two I played the first, like among custom-made levels.
Were you playing other games before you got into Doom?
I'm still playing other games, so of course.
What other games do you play?
You mean at all, or recently, or what? Because like nothing really approaches Doom in terms of time spent on the game. So
yeah, me too. I don't really play anything. I've definitely committed way more hours. Like if if there was like a chart of how many hours I put into any game versus Doom, everything would be like all the way like a bar graph. Like everything would be way to the bottom, and then Doom would be like this massive skyscraper with like tens and hundreds of thousands of hours that I put into it. It's ridiculous.
Oh yes, same for me. Like years of life wasted on it. Yeah,
right. I hope I don't like to consider it wasted time of my life because I think I've learned a lot from it. But I enjoy the game so much, and that's part of like why I put so many hours into it. It's just such a fun game. But
no, of course it was a joke, just a joke. Of course we're doing things we enjoy, so we're developing our skill and play hard levels just because I guess it's fun for us.
Yeah, right. But what other games? So what were some games that you were playing before you found out about the Doom community, for example?
I was a kid back then, so I played everything. I guess. Well, a bit of advertisement, I guess. Several years ago, I ran into, the Dark mod. It used to be a Doom 3 mod, but then it became standalone. It's a Thief-inspired game on a Doom 3 engine, so that's going to be another thing I keep returning to on occasion as soon as there are new levels. It's also like it's got an enthusiastic community that keeps making maps for it from time to time. Of course, the speed is understandably lower than that of Doom because the process is harder, but still.
Yeah.
So that's that.
What are some games that you're playing now? Or lately? I'm sorry, what are some games that you're playing lately?
Lately. So today, just finished replaying the reboot of Shadow Warrior, like several hours ago. Among the recent ones, I guess the latest one is going to be Dishonored 2.
So do you think like I haven't played Dishonored 2. What is that game about? Is any of it like kind of is that a shooter? Is it a first person shooter?
Not exactly. Did you happen to play Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, like ever?
No, I haven't. I haven't played a lot.
Okay, so let's start from the bottom then. Have you played
This is like a recurring theme on this show, by the way. Like when I talk to people about other games that they've played, and they're like, "Oh, have you played this?" And I'm like, "No, I only played Doom."
Okay, so you didn't play Thief either, I guess.
No, I haven't, but I know what it is. I've seen like screenshots and stuff of it.
Well, anyway, it's like actually it's a stealth game, so most of the time you'd better be unseen, hiding in the shadows and all that. And it's mostly melee based, so the pistols and stuff, they're like in Victorian England or something. They're just supplementary, and most of the time you're wielding a sword. So it's a kind of a silent assassin game, something like that.
That's pretty cool. So
it is.
Yeah. Well, the reason I ask is I know, like, I bring this up a lot on the show. Is like I ask people like what games they're playing. Sometimes when I play people's maps, something that I've been kind of wondering about lately is whether the maps that they make are influenced by video games that they've played. Because I've seen like really old maps, like we were talking about like 1995 like maps earlier. I've seen some people who like design maps based on like Ultima Underworld, and like their maps will have like kind of like this like dungeon theme to it, and I think like some people will like play a game that they really like, and then they'll design a map that's kind of influenced by something that they experienced in that game, and that will kind of like influence their mapping style. They like to design Doom maps based on games that they like. So I guess the reason why I was asking is I'm wondering if there's like maybe any kind of elements in these games that you apply to like maps that you've made, or maybe it has some kind of effect on the type of maps that you enjoy.
Not really, I don't think so. Though I guess it's obvious to everyone that up to this point I liked using Quake textures a lot, so
Yeah.
Quake surely was an influence, though I'm probably going to stop now. Enough is enough.
I like Quake textures. I'm a big fan of like that brown kind of theme, and like Quake has a lot of really awesome like gothic medieval stuff that's like very interesting. And I kind of wish I was more artsy in that way, because I would make textures on my own that use that kind of style. But I even though I really like brown stuff, I tend to gravitate more towards like tech based type stuff, because that stuff's easier for me to design. But I wish I had more of the skills to do Quake. Quake is just such a beautiful art theme. Like it's just the brick castles and everything, and the torches, and it's just all really cool.
Oh yeah, so far it's been a perfect match for the atmosphere I'm aiming most of the time. So
yeah.
But from now on, I'll have to look for some other ways to convey the message.
Well, I see in a lot of like if you look at like Slaughterfest 2012 and Slaughterfest 2011, Quake textures are used pretty liberally in that in those projects. I wonder if that's like I wonder if that's like any coincidence, or maybe that was just the resources that were used in the project, or if mappers who like Slaughterfest also are very heavily influenced by something like Quake.
Well, as far as I can tell, some of them actually do like Quake, so they might as well have been influenced by it, just like myself. So why not?
Yeah, well, it's a common thing, because like I see like in Slaughterfest, like there's a lot of like really dark and brown textures, and a lot of blood and fire and tortured people and things like that. That's kind of like the theme. And I guess the impression is to like try and make a really dark map for a map that's going to be really hard. But then there's other mappers who like design who don't do slaughter maps, like there's, for example, a lot of people that do like BTSX, Back to Saturn X. Like their maps are much more colorful, and they're kind of like cheery and fun and stuff. And that is kind of interesting, because like when I look at the community, there's people that have like anime avatars, or like avatars of like cartoons and things like that, and they'll design like really colorful maps. And then there's other people like you and myself who have avatars that are like black and white and very grim and kind of depressing, or not necessarily depressing, but kind of more serious. And I don't know, like I wonder if there's like that's one thing I notice in the community, is that there are like kind of these people who gravitate to these camps, like how I was talking about earlier, that there's people who play Slaughterfest maps, play and make Slaughterfest maps, and then there's people who do everything else. And there's kind of like this like I don't know. It's just an observation I've made. Really, it's that there's the people that are working more towards like Slaughterfest maps tend to have more, um, I guess like kind of like death metal influenced avatars, or like they kind of like a grim, brutal kind of theme in their maps and stuff like that. While other people are kind of treating Doom like it's kind of like this cartoon game, and they just make it fun and cheery and goofy.
John Suitpi once said that I'm influenced by black metal, though he isn't that far from the truth, I guess. Well, anyway, you see, for Back to Saturn X, you kind of have to maintain it on a high level, especially when you're going to use the same texture set for tens of levels, so that it wouldn't get boring, because, like 20 levels of Quake-influenced visuals in a Doom, they are probably going to be boring most of the time, unless they are really diverse. So I guess the colorful nature of that map set is understandable, actually.
It's not for me.
You need to distinguish things from one another, so that's that.
I do appreciate color, but not for me, man. I can play brown maps all day.
Same with me, but I mean, I can see where they're coming from. So.
Yeah.
And speaking of myself, I just like making oppressive stuff in both gameplay and on visual front. I like dark things, let's just put it that way, in pretty much everything. So it's no surprise to anyone who knows me well enough. Simple as that.
That is if you I wonder if this is like there was like a thread on Doomworld about like Doom stereotypes based on like the region of the world that they're from. Like what is that one project that won a CAC award that was made by a Russian mapper? I think it was by Linos, where it's like this really dark gray city and all the monsters are specters. I forget what it's called though.
Oh yeah, I remember.
You know what I'm talking about though?
I guess it was Comatose.
Comatose, yes, that's it. Right. It's a very gray and grim themed map. It's like it's this like urban this urban map. It's very detailed, but it's got like really there's a lot of trash everywhere, and the cities are very dark, and the skies are dark overcast, and it's kind of creepy. And then there's something like for example, White Mare is like, even though it uses snow, which is a little nice, but it also has a lot of like caves and castles and things like that, and it's very dark and grim. And like Eternal, he makes some like map sets that are very like brownish and dark and grim in that way too. Do you think that's like a common thing? Well, you're a Russian Doom mapper. Do you participate in like the Russian Doom forum?
Occasionally, yes, though not much is happening there as of late.
Oh, okay. Have you noticed that kind of?
Still, it depends on the mapper. Actually, I know Linus personally in real life, so I can tell.
Oh, cool.
You can blame him for these maps. Only him. It's the kind of person he is. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. If you compared something like a Russian Doom community project to like the Japanese Doom community project, what Japanese is like kind of like cartoony and it has all kinds of colors and all kinds of stuff like that, whereas like the Russian Doom community has like more dark and like more serious and realistic map sets. But I don't know if that's just a coincidence, or maybe there's like some kind of something that's some kind of outside influence that's making people design maps in that sort of way.
I guess it's a coincidence, actually. So you see, most of Russian projects are based on speed maps, and speed maps are usually dictated by some topics. So whenever they get some snowy town or anything, they all make snowy town. So that's that, and then they just assemble those things following some specific topic, like the prevalent one mostly. So
okay.
Something like that.
All right. Well, listen, Demonologist, I had a lot of fun talking to you, man. This is a lot of fun.
Same for me. Thank you.
This is great. I'm glad you were able to come on the show and talk about some of your interests, because I know I've seen some of your posts on Doomworld, and some people do think, I did at some points, like you'll review a project and I thought you were like overly harsh. But on the
what an asshole! Yes.
Yeah, what a jerk. But but I'm happy I was actually able to have you on the show to like actually talk to you and like learn who you are as a person and things like that. Because I think that's something that the Doom World community could use more of, is people getting to know each other a little better. Because it's very easy to just read text and assume that people mean the worst when they're talking, and that's not always true. Sometimes they're just saying things that they think need to be said. And so I was very happy to have you on the show. It was very nice to meet you, and I hope the people listening got a kick out of learning who you are too.
Well, thanks for inviting me. That was very cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. If you want to be on the show again another time, I'd be happy to have you on.
Of course.
If we can think of more things to talk about.
Terrible English and Russian accent. So.
Oh, stop! You're honestly, you sound perfect. I have no trouble understanding you at all.
Thanks, mate.
Okay. Thanks for being on the show. Thank you, everybody else, for listening. And I talked to Natural 20. We had to reschedule. I think we'll be talking to him next week. I don't know who I'm talking to next. Let me look at my calendar real quick.
Well, anyway.
I don't know.
Luck in your future endeavors, of course.
Yeah. I don't know who I'm talking to next. Probably Natural 20 again, sometime next week. But I do have a duel that I'm going to be doing with Alfonso. I don't know if you saw this yet. Alfonso and I are having a podcast throwdown. We'll be fighting to the death in Doom. And we're going to prove who has the better podcast by way of killing each other for some reason. So check that out. It'll be August 15th, 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I don't know who's streaming it. We'll find out more details later. But there's a thread on Doomworld, so check it out in the Doom multiplayer subforum. And check out more of these World Extermination Radio shows. I intend to be doing this for a long time and talking to more kinds of people. And if you have people that you would like to hear from, send them a private message to tell them about the show. And maybe that we can get in contact and we'll set up an interview or something like that. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Space Marines, for tuning in. Thank you, Demonologist, for being here. And by the way, Demonologist, if you have do you have any projects that you're working on that you'd like to promote that you'd like to get more attention?
Not really.
Not at the moment. Okay. Well, if that comes around, I'll be happy to promote your projects.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you later.